Good afternoon. My name is Carson Hetty. I'm the cloud specialist from Microsoft here in St. Louis, Missouri. We are joined today by Oakwood Systems Group, and they are going to be presenting on a Power BI solution in System Center. Appreciate their team and expertise today, and appreciate everyone joining. This session is recorded, so if by any chance you need a copy of the recording, feel free to shoot me a note or reach out to your account executive, and we will be happy to provide it. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Cliff and the Oakwood team to present, and look forward to the session. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Carson. Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody, for joining. My name is Cliff Hunt. I have been with Oakwood and been working as a consultant for about the past 5 years. I've been in IT for about 20 years, working a large portion of that time in configuration management and IT service management. Oakwood, like I said, I've been with Oakwood for 5 years. Oakwood has worked on many projects internationally and throughout the U.S. We've worked on thousands of software. We've been in business for over 35 years. We do have a full infrastructure team and a full app dev team. We are an awarded partner with Microsoft. We've obtained many awards through them for the past several years. And as far as customer base, you can see that we've worked on with some very large companies on some very large projects that have spanned several years. So to get to the agenda for today, for actually what we're covering, like I said, I've been in infrastructure for a long time, and one of the things that I've noticed over and over again is infrastructure people tend to worry a lot about technical detail and a lot about configuration and not a whole lot about data. And a lot of infrastructure utilities that have came out the past several years are database-driven applications. And because they're database-driven, that means we can get to that data, we can report on it, we can use it, we can drive compliance with it. But a lot of times within infrastructure, because it takes so much effort to get some of that reporting done, it kind of goes by the wayside. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about was the Power BI platform and how capable that platform is to report on all types of different data. So is infrastructure and operational reporting important? Well, as you can see by the statements on the slide, I know that we've all been in that place at one time or another, and it seems like things and problems keep getting bigger and bigger, and we're looking for solutions and ways to overcome those different objectives that we have in our environment. So let's look at Power BI and CCM specifically inside of the configuration management suite. What is Power BI? Just a quick overview. Power BI is a set of services and applications. It does have SaaS offerings. You can run Power BI on-prem. Power BI Desktop is pretty much your main portal to get to data and to work through data. There is a Power BI report server that is now available on-prem. You can also, with Power BI, not only can you use Power BI Desktop to capture data, view data, manipulate data, but you can also push that up to the SaaS service and create dashboards out of that. So instead of just looking at typical grid data that we're all used to seeing through Excel, you can actually create visuals off of it. So when we get to the point that we're, if we're trying to report on, say, user accounts or computers, instead of sifting through thousands and thousands of rows in an Excel spreadsheet and trying to manipulate Excel in some strange way to correlate different data sets, now we have an easy way that we can do that with Power BI Desktop. Power BI Desktop also has mobile apps that you can use for consumption of the data. So once you build your reports and you push your reports out to the Power BI service, you can use Power BI mobile apps to be able to view that data just to have some insight on what's going on inside of your environment. So from Power BI Desktop, you can push data and publish data up to the service. You can also install a on-prem data gateway server, which will allow you to synchronize the data that's in the cloud on a time schedule. Power BI also comes with a multitude of connectors. to be able to get data from that are built in and native to the environment. You can get SQL, you get it from analysis services, Excel, CSV files, text files, XML, MySQL databases, Oracle. List just keeps going. For System Center ConfigMan, the primary things that we're looking at our environment are process control, being able to control and manipulate the configuration of systems on the fly. It also helps you with environmental controls. One of the primary things that Configuration Manager is used for also is patch management and patch deployment. However, ConfigMan has a lot more capabilities than just patch deployment. You can also do application deployment, hardware inventory, software inventory. You can extend that inventory out to capture pretty much anything you can think of on the machine, a file, a registry setting, configuration, COM objects. You can extend those as much as you want, and once you do those extensions inside a Configuration Manager, it'll pull that data from those systems back into the ConfigMan database. So once it's in the ConfigMan database, traditionally we would use SSRS reporting to be able to go in and create reports and report on that data. But now we can use Power BI to link into it to be able to manipulate it a lot easier than we could through SSRS. Some of the other objectives you can accomplish with Configuration Manager is endpoint protection and malware protection. You can also do desired configuration management, so you can set settings on your machines. You can ensure that group policy settings are being applied appropriately, and if they're not, you can report on those systems that are not applying the policies appropriately. You can also see the client health status. You can drive operating system deployment with CCM. Another item that Configuration Manager captures is the encryption state of your devices. So one of the big things that's obviously been coming out the past couple years, if you've got mobile devices or even desktops, you should be encrypting those hard drives to protect them. You can create a compliance item inside of Configuration Manager and be able to report your encryption states of your devices back to Power BI, and also be able to report on TPM settings, BIOS settings, UEFI settings, things like that. So what data is available inside of CCM? We just covered a large portion of that on the literal side. Conceptual side of that is you can capture and prove what your process control is. Are your processes working that you're using for configuration management? Are your environmental controls working? Are they applying appropriately? Do you have patch compliance? Do you have configuration compliance? Application cost management. You can add cost data into Power BI and correlate that to your hardware so that you can have cost roll-ups. Hardware, software inventory, extensible inventory, and you can also check for configuration drift. But obviously the top 3 points here are the primary points inside of the conceptual side of that. We have to have process, we have to have environmental control, we have to document what our processes are, and then we have to be able to prove them. And to be able to prove what your processes and your environmental controls are, reporting is one of the key places where that comes in. So the requirements, Microsoft has released a CCM template for Power BI that has some initial configuration inside of it. The requirements for that is to have System Center 2012 R2 SP1 or later, a destination database. The reason for the destination database is that if you don't really want to run reports off of your CCM database. Contingency could happen if people are doing a large amount of report refreshes. They're putting additional load on that CCM database and on that SQL server. So what Microsoft has done with this solution is given us the capability to offload some of that data over to a Azure SQL database, or now we can also offload it to a on-prem SQL server. For the machine where you run the installation for the CCM template, the only 2 requirements are .NET Framework 4.5 or later and PowerShell v5, which most Windows 10 devices, if you're running those, are already going to have that, so no problems there. You also need to have Power BI Desktop. That's going to be your main configuration tool for getting to the data. And then if you want to be able to share templates with your organization and share data throughout your organization through Power BI, you have to have a Power BI Pro license. And that's what also gives you the dashboard capabilities. So the solution architecture, we need a CCM database, a reporting database, Power BI Desktop, and Power BI SaaS. And let's go ahead and look at, I've got a black box design diagram. So if we look everything from where this database tier is to the left, that is all configuration manager. You've got a primary site server. The primary site server is your management point, your distribution point, software update point. It's where you put all your packages, your desired configuration management, operating system deployment comes out of there. You can also do USMT, user state migration, out of CCM. This depicts a secondary site server which has a role as a distribution point and an operating system deployment point. That can also be set up to be a storage point for user state migration. So our config-man clients, which you can see here further on the left, communicate primarily with the management point configured for the site. So you're going to configure all your desired state configuration here. It's going to go out to your clients. Your clients are going to get that data, and then they're going to report on a schedule inventory information between computers, users, software, how the system's configured. They're going to report all of that back to the management point. From there, the management point is either going to use a database that's included, co-located with the management point server, or you can use an external database. And if we look at the logical flow of that, when the client data comes into the management point, it goes over to the SQL server, it gets dropped into the CCM database. CCM, the configuration, since WSUS is on here for patches, WSUS has its own separate database which reports back to the CCM database also. And then traditionally, what we would do to see these reports is we would either go inside of the CCM console, or we would hit the SSRS reporting point built into CCM, and that would correlate to a report server database, and then you can run basic SSRS reports. So if we look at the Power BI functionality, and let me drag this legend up here. So if we look at the full template functionality, what we have is a user sitting here, and he's got Power BI Desktop. That's the primary way that he's going to interact with external data sources. So the CCM template solution does give you a pre-built template that you can put into Power BI Desktop and very quickly link it straight up to your CCM database. As far as data synchronization process across there, we have a configured task that sits on either your CCM server or an external workstation, or if you've got an automation service, you can also run it there. And we can see that there's a data sync that occurs. Basically, this process that is built is a scheduled task on the device. It uses PowerShell, and it runs a PowerShell command which sucks the data out of CCM. Whatever data you specify, it sucks it out of CCM, and then it pushes it over to a SQL Azure-based database. From there, the Power BI service can now be configured to capture that data. And then a user that is either in your organization or outside of your organization, you can give them access to the Power BI service and to the dashboard that can be configured inside of Power BI, so that they can go in and see some of the reports, and we'll go through some of that here in just a bit. One thing to note here is with Power BI Desktop, not only can we report on CCM data, but this is the template that was created for CCM is one that you can correlate other data sets with. So Microsoft Active Directory, you can actually push that data also over to Power BI, and you have alternate data sets that you can pull into that report from an infrastructure perspective, such as your ITSM or your ticketing database, logging, monitoring, and alerting. So SCCM, you can also correlate some of that data with CCM to get alert data on different systems in your environment, and then on the same pane of glass, drive through different configuration parameters so that you can dig down and get information about those systems without having to do a lot of point and click. The solution that's provided can be run inside of Azure, but like we said before, it doesn't have to be. You can set that task up when you configure the template. It will suck CCM data out of the database, and then you can push it over to a database that you have on-prem. And then you can, again, use PowerBI Desktop to view that data, and then if you choose to, the user can also push the data to the Power BI service. But this configuration, there would be no outside data sources. You'd not be able to sync those. So if we look at the demo, so this is the solution template that came from Microsoft, and we can see in here we've got current health evaluation, current endpoint compliance, the number of clients, the number of users we have, clients by OS, health evaluation statuses. Over on the top right-hand side, we can see current computers with missing updates and the total number of missing updates in the environment. Now, this is running in my lab environment, which I've got several servers that have been turned off for a while. So I do have quite a few servers that are actually missing patches on them that we'll be able to see here in a bit. Your protection states, quick roll up on endpoint protection. If you're not using endpoint protection, you can also use data from whatever your antivirus solution is to report on also. You can see that we've got spyware in here, whether or not antivirus is enabled on the machines, and what their endpoint compliance is. There's also a built-in portion for malware. Now, I don't have any malware in my lab environment, so I don't have any data to show in there. But you can see we can get the malware activity in the environment. That information gets updated automatically from Microsoft, so we can see what the severity is of the different types of malware in the environment. We can select different classifications of malware in here also. And then if we look at update compliance, so we can see that we've got computers missing updates in here. And I've got my Windows servers, Windows 10 systems, Windows 7. We can actually click on these, and you can see that all of the visuals in here are adaptive and will adjust to whatever sets we have. So if we look at Windows 10, we can see that I've got two machines here that are reporting that they're missing updates. We also have the ability to go over here and select a specific machine to see what its specific status is. So app 1 has 11 missing updates. We can see the bulletin tiles that are listed. There's also a information URL here. So rather than digging around, going in the CCM console, trying to figure out where the update is and finding the link from there, from this report portal, we can create that link and drive straight out to the Microsoft documentation for that particular patch. We can also report on software. We've got installation count by publisher and program. So we can select one of these and show that we've got Google Update Helper. Well, if you know you're not supposed to have any type of automatic updates on any of your systems, then that shouldn't be there. So we can see, once I clicked on Google, we can see that we've got 2 computers inside this environment that have that software installed. If we want to see just the software that are on particular systems, we can click Windows 10. This shows all of the software that's on our Windows 10 devices. Again, these are the computers. If we're looking for information and software installed on a specific machine, we can choose that machine, and it'll show us what software we have there also. So you can see how adaptive the platform is. So these 5 slides are the slides that actually come inside of the template. But this is certainly not by any means anywhere close to the amount of data that we can actually report on. One item that I did add into this particular template is an extension to report on AD data. And if we look inside of PowerBI connectors, these are all the different data types that we can connect to that's built in to Power BI. So one of those options in there is Active Directory. And then once we go into Active Directory, we can drill down through that data, figure out what we do and do not want to see inside of there, and then build out the report. So inside of this, we have how many accounts we have in the environment, the total number of service accounts, total number of user accounts, the domains. I've only got 1 domain in my lab. If we had multiple domains, they would break out just like these other breakouts have. We can see companies in here. So one of the places that this is nice, and I've helped a couple different companies do this, is with their AD cleanup efforts. We can get some decent grid data in here. We can see user ID, display name, first name, last logon stamp. I apologize, I'm getting a little bit of lag out of my lab right now. We can see company name, titles, phone numbers, email addresses, department, division, employee ID. We can see where the object is inside of Active Directory, account statuses. So if we have a large company, it's not uncommon for the AD environment to go a little crazy. It tends to get very inconsistent if they don't have processes that are driving account creations. So whenever we start looking at other services like Azure AD, we want to make sure that our data is consistent before we start pushing data up to AD and we start using that data across different apps and we start using our account settings across different apps. For instance, I had worked with one company who their phone numbers was one of the big items. They started using Skype, and obviously they wanted to be able to use the integrated capabilities, but their phone numbers actually the formats were all over the place and were very inconsistent and were not a common format that a phone number would be put in. So when they started using calling apps, users couldn't click on a phone number to be able to call someone because it wouldn't work. So they had to actually look at the phone number, type the phone number in. So we can use a tool set like this to drive down and figure out where inconsistencies are inside of the Active Directory environment. So for instance, here we've got 2 companies, and we know we should only have 3 companies in the environment, A+ Transport and KTR Systems. We've also got a KTR system up here without the S on the end. So that's an inconsistency in that data. We can click on it and we can find out exactly who that user is very quickly. If we also need to know who are all the people that work for A+ Transport that are contractors, we can click on those and sort those users out. Inside of departments, we can look for who's configured as IT. We also have multi-select options in here by holding down the left-click key. So if we want to see IT department, infrastructure department, and R&D department, we can see who those users are. Offices. Kansas City office. This comes out of the Active Directory configuration also inside of Power BI. And then I've also got a city breakout that's on here. So we can see who's in St. Louis, who's in Chicago. The other item that's nice here is when you're doing Active Directory cleanup efforts is to find out what user accounts are potentially dead accounts. So by breaking this data out, we can see that there are 3 users that had a last login timestamp of 2016. So we can look at those, and there's a good chance they're bad accounts. They need to come out of the environment, be disabled. We can also do multi-selects there. And we can drill down into the data. We can also add OUs to see what users are in which OU, what users are in service account OU. So that's just a quick example of some additional data that we can get from CCM. So one item that we don't see here anywhere in any of these slides is any type of computer details. No computer details here. Nothing inside of malware. Update compliance, we get machine selectors, but we're probably not going to want to go get computer details by going to every single slide and selecting machine connectors or machine selectors. So from here, if we want to get data from CCM, we can go inside of SQL, and the CM_P01, that's actually my configuration management database. Now inside of here, I'm going to create these queries directly off of the CCM database. In a production environment, you do not want to do that. You want to offload that data over to a reporting database. That way you can report from it. Power BI, people can link into it with PowerBI Desktop, and they can refresh data as much as they want without having to worry about taking down your production database. So if we look inside of views, this is all the data that we can capture. And if anyone has any experience with CCM, you've got collections in here. We've got distribution point information, group information, add or remove programs, all the data that's stored in add or remove programs for the different machines, computer system information. So the one that I'm going to look at is actually the system table, which is a flat table that gives us quite a bit of information on the system right from the start. So if we look inside of the VR system table, one thing to note here, this resource ID inside of CCM, the resource ID is your key field. That is what uniquely identifies a device inside of the CCM environment. We've got what Active Directory site name the machines are tied to, CPU information, the domain that those systems are in, last logon timestamp of the computer name, operating system, and then we can also see that we've got virtual host name over here and whether or not it is a virtual machine. So I'm going to take this top 1000 out of here. And we're just going to copy that query. And we're going to add this information to Power BI. So we're going to add a new tab. And then we're going to go get data. We're going to get it from an SQL server. Server name is SQL1, database name CM_P01. And we're going to drop that query right here. And I know we're reporting on CCM right now, but this also speaks to being able to report to external data sets, because you can point that to whatever SQL server you want, create the query for capturing the data that you need, and put it in right here. Now once it pulls that information in, it gives us a preview of what the data looks like, and then we hit load to load the data into Power BI. Now from this point, this data is sitting locally on my machine in the lab. There's nothing in the cloud. I can manipulate the data, make changes, make additions, and save it, and it goes nowhere. It stays right there locally. So if we go over here to edit queries, query 1, this is the data that I just pulled in from CCM. And we can close and apply that. So the query editor is where you primarily work with all your data sets. You can also, from in here, you can set transforms on your data set. You can remove duplicates, remove errors, change data types, replace values, replace errors that may come through in the query. Oops, sorry, got some lag on my mouse there. And we're going to close and apply that. So now we can see that we have CCM V system over here in our fields. And this is all of those different columns that you just saw in the query editor come through this parent object. So from here we can add a grid. And then we can start adding different properties to that grid. So if we look through what we have, we've got build, client, that BIOS name, that'd probably be a good one to have in there. Resource ID, like I said, the resource ID is what identifies a unique client inside of the CCM environment. Let's go ahead and put username in there, user domain, serial number, operating system, last logon timestamp, virtual machine host name, AD site name. So notice here on these last logon timestamps, it's breaking out the actual date so that we can see quarter, year, quarter, month, day. We're going to change that, and instead of doing a date hierarchy, we're just going to just show me the date. For the creation date, we're going to do the same thing. So from here, here's our basic grid data that we pulled in. And let's go ahead and drop out a pie chart over here, because I want to know if I'm running virtual machines, what systems are running on what virtual machine. So we can see virtual machine host name. We can drag that into the legend, drag that into the value field. We can come over to the title on this. VM host. If I can type, we'll put VM host. So we can see that our VMs, we've got HyperV 0, HyperV 1, 2, 3, and 4. So if we click on HyperV now, we can see that that data scales down and shows us exactly what machines are running on that particular HyperV host. This is actually pulling back the HyperV host that that machine is running on in Azure. And then we can see our HyperV hosts by themselves and machines that are not a HyperV host, such as a physical laptop. So we can add another pie chart here. And this time, let's say that we want to break out by operating system name. We want to know information about the different operating systems in the environment. So we can look at operating system and name. And that data is a little crunched up, so we can just come over here. Let's go ahead and make it a bar chart instead. So now we can say, show me all the Windows NT10 stations. Windows Server 6.3. So that's basic workstation information. If we look at the CCM database, I've got my view filtered there. Let me remove that, get past our collections. And we can look at baseboard information, which we don't have any in that one. Installed software. Where is that guy at? So I know there's a table in here that contains BIOS information. And we can see, again, we have resource IDs here, BIOS versions, BIOS description, manufacturer of the BIOS. So this came in handy when we had the problems with needing firmware updates across chipsets and processors for one of the customers that I was working with, and we put some of these reports together so that they could report on different chipsets and different processors in their environment also, and that information can be pulled in. So we can see on these systems, we've got Intel chipsets, we can see our clock speeds, we can see our processors that are listed on there. So I think I'm going to go ahead and grab this. And normally you would clean these up. I'm just doing this for the sake of the webinar. We would normally clean up the fields out of here that we don't need. So we can come in here. Let's go ahead and grab another data set. That is not going to work in that field. P01. And I grab that data. So then we can go in and edit queries again. And there's the query that I just brought in. We're going to rename that and just call it BIOS. Now, one of the things that's nice, since we're working with a fairly flat data set and we have resource IDs in all these tables, Power BI is actually going to create the relationships about our data behind the scenes. We don't even have to mess with doing that. So we can close and apply. And we'll rename this to computer info. And let's just duplicate that page. And then we can rename it. And we'll call that BIOS info. So now we've got the same grid data that we had before in the previous. And we'll go ahead and take that out. If we look up here, the data set that we just brought in, we named it BIOS. So we can come down here, select our grid data, look at caption. Caption's empty on that one. So let's look at name. So now we can see that we've got Intel Xeon and we have manufacturer. We can search for the data and we can see that it searches all of our data sets for that data type. And there's manufacturer, that's the one I want. So we can drop that over there and we can see the manufacturer across all our machines. And then again, we can create a pie graph, and we're going to grab manufacturer and put it in here. So then we can say what machines have Intel-based processors and what machines have AMD-based processors. Now, if we're curious how that correlates to our HyperV hosts, we can add another pie chart. And I just took that visual off, but we'll put it back in there. Clear our search bar. And if we look back under our system database, our data set, virtual machine host name, we can drag that up, drag this one over. And we can see the data that breaks across there. So we can see on HyperV 1, that's how many AMD processors we have. HyperV 0 is Intel based. Now, relationships, when you're bringing data in. I was talking about that resource ID, how it correlates to everything in the system. So these data sets here come in from the built-in Microsoft template, and you can see the relationships. You can see that we actually have CCM computers, and that relates to BIOS. It's a one-to-one relationship. Power BI automatically established that relationship between those tables. You can go in and edit these relationships if you need to. If you have a field that Power BI isn't sure about whether or not their key fields are related information, then you can set those relationships up manually by yourself. You can double-click on one of these relationships, and you can tell it between the two data sets how you want to correlate the data. So I don't want to get too deep into those details. We'll go back to the basic dashboard. And we can come up here and we've got a publish button. This is what's going to publish it out to the Power BI service. You want to save your changes? Yes. And we can grab the CCM reporting workspace inside of Power BI. It says we've already got a data set out there. Do you want to replace? Yes. It's going to be done in a second. I think with doing the presentation and the screen share, I'm chewing up too much of my bandwidth. So I've got the previous version of this out in the Power BI space now. It has the user information for Active Directory in there and all the defaults. We'll wait for that just a second to update. Actually, I'm just going to cancel that. And we'll start another one. CCM reporting space. So if we look out at app.powerbi.com and you sign in with the same account that you used in Power BI Desktop to push the data up, you can see that we've got under the CCM reporting space, we've got a report and no dashboard out here. So that report there we go. I apologize. I think my internet connection's lagging a little bit. Here we go. So this is the same information that we had inside of Power BI Desktop, but now it's available through the Power BI service. And you can use the web browser to access the data. You can share that link to share it with people inside or outside your organization. If we click on the visuals from the overview inside the Power BI service, we can see that they still work as we would expect them to. Our protection dashboard, as we saw inside. Malware information. And our AD user information. And these are also responsive visuals. Let's see if that is still not updated. So from here, we can create a dashboard. And let's say we want to know current health evaluation. We can create a new dashboard since we don't have one yet. And we can pin that, and we see dashboard just flipped over to CCM. So let's go to update compliance. And if we want to know how many of these systems are missing, we can add that visual to an existing dashboard. Missing updates by OS, we can pin that out to the dashboard. And let's do last log on timestamp. We can add that to the existing dashboard. And then we can come over here to the dashboard and we can see our visuals. If we click on one of those visuals, it takes you into the reporting tab that visual came from. We can also drag these around, format them differently, make them larger, make them smaller. So from here, if we look at last log on timestamp, again, we can drill down straight into that report. Man, that does not want to go out for some reason. I'm going to try to publish this one more time real quick. And that was not... we've only got a couple minutes left. I'm going to, if we jump back over here, so those are the Power BI basics of updating the data and pushing the data out to the Power BI service. If we look at some other examples here, this was actually a dashboard, and there's a grid that should be down here that shows user data. We did an Active Directory cleanup for a customer that had a lot of inconsistencies between their PeopleSoft data and their Active Directory data, and they wanted to sync everything up. So what we did here was we created a grid that correlated the data between PeopleSoft and Active Directory and figured out whether or not that data matched up. And then whether or not it did or did not, it showed up on visuals here so that their infrastructure team could go through and use this report to figure out where all the data inconsistencies were and clean them up pretty quick. If we look at another one, this dashboard was actually created and we've got data blacked out here for personal information reasons. This actually came from CCM. This customer was deploying Windows 10. They were using CCM to do the deployments. They were using Service Manager to for their ITSM solution for ticketing. And so what we did here was we pulled through tickets that were coming through help desk, only that were classified as Windows 10, and they were doing an O365 rollout at the same time. So we have Office and Windows 10 tickets listed in here. Here's the ticket information at the bottom, whether or not the ticket was escalated, what the status of the tickets are, and tickets by month. And then there's a link here that they can click on. It takes them straight out to their ITSM portal for ticketing. This information here also breaks out and shows Windows 10, the different versions of Windows 10 that you have in the environment, the operating system counts, the version counts, the physical offices that those objects are, or that the physical computers are located in, and what the user's department was. That way project managers could use this information to have some control over the rollout and the functionality and communication processes that were going on inside the organization whenever we were trying to coordinate a mass rollout of Windows 10. So that's everything I have for the actual demo. My information here, again, my name is Cliff Hunt. My email address is here. You can feel free to email me at any time with any questions. Oakwood's website's also listed here, and contact information to get a hold of Oakwood if you'd like to discuss the solution a little more. Is there any questions? Carson, can we open it up for questions? And we've only got a couple of minutes there.
Certainly. Yeah, are there any questions that are top of mind that you'd like to ask now? Otherwise, we can certainly, if you want to reach out directly to Oakwood or to myself, we can certainly handle those one-on-one. So if you've got any questions, feel free to raise them now. Very good. Looks like we've got the contact information here. Any parting words, Cliff and team?
No, I mean the whole reason I wanted to put this together, it's something ITSM and configuration management is something that I really enjoy doing. So be happy to answer any questions that anybody has or give a hand where needed.
Very good. Thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and close the recording. And again, if you'd like a copy of the recording, feel free to reach out to me or to your account manager, and we'll get you a copy of that sent via email.